The single most influential person in the development of Icke's current ideas is a man named Brian Desbrow. Desbrow wrote a lot of conspiracy articles and posted them on the internet in the mid-90s into the 2000s. Later, these articles would be compiled into a book. Desbrow is behind an astonishing amount of Icke's research. There's a lot of interesting things about Mr. Desbrow. First of all, despite the fact that his bio says that he served as a director of research and development for several American high-technology companies and has provided consultation to a company involved in deep space research, there's no record of him doing anything like this on the internet, which seems odd since you would think that if a person who was publishing material on the internet so early in its history, that he would also leave some trail to his apparently earth-changing scientific research. Another interesting thing is that despite the fact that Icke, when referring to Desbrow, calls him his American scientist friend, you can read Desbrow's own bio to find out that his information was given to him by spiritual beings like Icke. Desbrow says, during an out-of-body experience which occurred in 1971, he encountered 5 highly spiritually evolved, non-physical beings who informed him that he must write a revisionist history of the world. The purpose of the book was to take the readers out of their comfort zones by presenting them with truth regarding such diverse subjects like the true location of Atlantis, the duplicitous acts of the Illuminati, and the fundamentals of free energy technology. It was not until later that the author learned that the non-physical entities that he had encountered were associated with a non-physical directorate who were the overlords of a group of terrestrial mystics known through the centuries as the Quadragon. It is the role of the Quadragon to intercede in the political affairs of the world periodically in an attempt to elevate the level of human spirituality. It's interesting that, like David, Desbrow also speaks out very harshly against Alice Bailey and the Ascended Masters in his book. He even says, the Lucius Trust is a major New Age command center on behalf of the Illuminati, and her book, Education in the New Age, outlined a social engineering program which later was adopted by the Club of Rome. In it she wrote, the science of eugenics will grow. Desbrow also writes, Ascended Masters were in actuality merely nicknames she had assigned to the wealthy Masonic patrons of the Theosophical Society, and displayed outrage against phony psychics claiming to channel these non-existent beings. But in an equally amazing feat of doublethink, Desbrow believes the exact thing that Alice Bailey believes. That is, that the non-physical directorate, or ascended spiritual beings, are intervening in the political affairs of the world in an attempt to elevate the level of human spirituality, which is arguably the main point to theosophy, as well as all the stuff about the Aryans, which we will see later. As far as Desbrow's scientific background, according to his bio, it seems to be limited to a story he tells where a chance encounter with a pediatrician who had been one of Wilhelm Reich's research associates gave him access to all of his notes, which he says enabled him to acquire a knowledge of weather engineering and organotic science. In addition, as luck would have it, a similar thing happened to him, but this time it was with Nikola Tesla's notes. He says he met an old lady at a spiritual healing circle who had asked him if he liked Nikola Tesla. She apparently then told him a story that he writes on his website. It says, quote, one day, continued the lady, Tesla felt a tug on his coat sleeve. Looking down, he saw the landlord's 12-year-old son, who said, Mr. Tesla, will you teach me all that you know? Tesla was so impressed that the boy became one of Tesla's enthusiastic protégés, and later married the lady the author had just met. The lady then provided the author with some of her late husband's research notes on free energy and anti-gravitic technology. In this manner, many doors were opened, thus enabling the author to acquire meaningful data for his 2 books. The strangest part about Desbrow's bio, in my opinion, is that he claims to be an expert at deprogramming mind control victims. He claims that he does this in order to get information out of them to help his research into the New World Order. He has written quite a lot about trauma-based mind control, and at that time, very little was known on the internet about it. And it does appear he knows quite a lot about how to program multiples. This will become very interesting as we continue this investigation. So with all that in mind, let's take a look at how David Icke was influenced by Brian Desbrow. Ike's book, The Biggest Secret, is the first time that I know of that Ike mentions Desborough in print. He dedicated that particular book to him, and he cites him profusely throughout the book as his source for things like Martians coming to Earth and founding the Aryan race, which the reptilians used to overtake the planet. Brian is also the source for much of the information on the Babylonian world, and things like black people are a result of the Earth being closer to the sun at one point, the Ice Age being an illusion, monoatomic gold, directed energy weapons, UFOs are government craft, crop circles are space beams, David's new view on Jesus, and much more. Ivan Fraser, the other person who David dedicated his book, The Biggest Secret, to, later spoke out against David and said this about Brian Desborough, quote, "Is there anything David could tell us about Brian Desborough's background to allay any doubts we may have about his integrity, considering his massive influence in the content and direction of The Biggest Secret?" Also, Ike's subsequent book called Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center Disaster is no better than a copy and pasting of Brian Desborough's article entitled The 9/11 Disaster, The Myth and Reality. If you have read Ike's Alice in Wonderland book on 9/11, please read Desborough's article when you have time, and you will see that the information in there is exactly the same. The wording, even the mistakes. But the curious thing is that even though it's clear from reading Desborough's 9/11 article that Desborough is the one who did all the research, Ike doesn't cite Desborough one time in his book, even though it's painfully obvious that it was taken from him. I think that Desborough was quite content to feed information to Ike, even if he got no credit. One example of this is in regard to the reptilian scandal. As I mentioned, The Biggest Secret is dedicated to Brian Desborough and another man named Ivan Fraser. According to Fraser, it was Desborough that introduced Ike to Arizona Wilder, and it was her testimony that ended up being the reason why Ike went public with the reptilians thing. Desborough also admits to introducing Ike to Arizona Wilder, as well as arranging the meeting between the two, because Wilder was a victim of trauma-based mind control, and apparently Desborough had accessed her programming in order to get information about the Illuminati. According to him, he was amazed to find that she confirmed what he had already been telling Ike, which will be important later. This is Ivan Fraser's side of the story. He had been proofreading The Biggest Secret for David Icke, and he found out about the reptilians thing this way. He says, quote, "Arizona Wilder was not mentioned at all in the draft copy of The Biggest Secret, which I had read. David had not met her yet. When the book was released, people started ringing me with questions like, is it true about the reptiles? And is this stuff about the royal family true? At which time I replied that I thought it was, based on the fact that the version that I had read stated only the theory of reptilians and that certain of the royals were involved in satanic rituals. Soon I heard about Arizona Wilder. David stated that he saw his encounter with Arizona Wilder as an amazing synchronicity which endorsed his work in his latest book. How could she have known all this stuff which tallied so exactly with The Biggest Secret? Well, I believe I'm not as naive as David, and I know exactly how she could have known. Ike was passing copies of the book via post to me and others for editing. Fraser continues, this brings in another character who is pivotal to the entire Biggest Secret thesis. It was a contact of David's named Brian Desborough, who introduced Arizona to David. Brian is mentioned as a source for a great deal of the information in the book, having supplied most of the material on which David based his idea about the Martians coming to Earth and founding the Aryan race, which the reptilians used as a vehicle to overtake the planet. Brian is also the source for much of the information David had compiled on the Babylonian world, its myths, and how they fed into the sinister secret societies. It was Brian Desborough who was also looking at the draft copy of The Biggest Secret at the same time as myself, i.e. before David met Arizona Wilder. Therefore, the fact that Brian Desborough may be responsible for fundamentally leading the direction of David's research, if not planting much of the basis of the book in David's mind, is obvious. But then, to be the same person responsible for giving him the so-called eyewitness to testify to the verity of that information is highly suspicious. Brian also writes articles on mind control and seems very knowledgeable on the subject. Is it possible that he could be directly involved in some way that we are not being told about? Fraser also says that Arizona endorsed Desborough's theories so closely that, quote, you would almost think she had already read the book or had been given the information beforehand. He continues, or considering that she claims to be an ex-mind-controlled slave, could it be that she was pre-programmed? Testimony from Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien as to how arduous it is to deprogram a CIA slave makes me very suspicious that Arizona Wilder could be considered reliable. She claims that since her programmer died, the programming broke down. I don't believe this can be accepted as such, and external experts would have to be brought in to convince me that if she was controlled to the highest level, that she could be so deprogrammed now to be considered reliable. Brian Desbrow describes the story in this way. My own research, based on unpublished astrophysical data, revealed that Mars originally occupied our planet's orbit and was populated by a technologically advanced Aryan race. A celestial catastrophe displaced Mars into its present orbit, forcing the Aryan survivors to colonize our planet and subsequently construct the Great Pyramid. Then they were overthrown by an evil priesthood who established the royal court of the dragon in Egypt. While David was writing his book, it was my good fortune to meet the mother goddess of the Illuminati. She corroborated my research, adding that the Illuminati hierarchy are shape-shifting dragons who require the consumption of Aryan blood in order to maintain their shape-shifting capability, hence their opposition to interracial marriages. As we watch these clips of Arizona Wilder, notice that when she was asked about the history of the reptilians, that she says that she was made to learn this. No matter who she thinks taught her this information, the fact that a bunch of Satanists made someone learn something sounds like programming to me.
In your experience, being brought up in this Illuminati environment, were you ever told anything about where these reptilians came from and what is the history of it all?
I was made to learn through Mothers of Darkness, which is a certain aspect of the organization, because that was an early part of my training, the history of what was the Illuminati on this planet. And what I learned was that the Aryans originally were from Mars, and the reptilians came to that planet they came from another place. They came to that planet. They came to rule because they wanted to mix, so they said, with that race, but they became the overlords.
That's an interesting term, overlords. Brian Desbrow uses it almost 30 times in his book, compared to Ike using it one time, and even that was in a quote. It doesn't prove that the info was planted by Desbrow, but it is a suspicious coincidence.
And the Martians, or Aryans, were seeking to escape from it. They went to the moon, and then were there attacked, and they then went to Earth and established culture here on Earth approximately 6,000 years ago. And at that point in time, they were doing well, and they were mixing with the indigenous population of this Earth. They were getting along with. And then about 4,000 years ago, the reptilians arrived here and again began to take over. And they instilled themselves in different places underground in the Earth, and also this one part of them, the ruling part, took over and became involved in the politics and in the religion, and started controlling through these means at that point in time.
A woman named Sva Lee, who is widely regarded as trustworthy by many in the truth movement of all backgrounds, claims to be a former programmer for the Illuminati. She is currently in hiding, we hope, but her writings, which are still posted on the internet, fill in many of the details about how mind control slaves are programmed. One time she was asked about this reptilian idea. The question is, Sva Lee, I have to ask you this. There are stories floating around on the internet about the Illuminati and other agencies being run by extraterrestrials, in particular a reptilian race operating from a higher dimension. Any thoughts on that? My answer will probably cause a lot of anger, and it's not meant to step on any toes. Here it goes. I've never seen an alien or extraterrestrial. I have seen some programming to make people think they saw aliens as a cover story for programming, if they remembered. None of the head trainers I knew or others on the Leadership Council believed in aliens, although I never asked them. I personally believe that the reptilian stuff is actually the demonic at work. I have seen shape-shifting and other stuff because of demonic influence. Okay, so some of you here will say, gee, she believes in demons. That's as far out as aliens. Well, this is what the Illuminati certainly believe in. They know there are spiritual realities, and they think that they can control them. Those of a more cynical bent would say that the shape-shifting was a drug-induced hallucination and group hysteria in the context of a ritual setting. I will let each reader decide based on their personal comfort zone, but no, absolutely no reptiles or aliens seen in Washington, D.C. or San Diego, California as of 5 years ago. At least I never saw them. Interesting that Ike seems to validate this idea that spirits can make a person shapeshift.
It was a lady who channeled this consciousness back in 1990, and I'll just read what it said because it's so relevant to now with the hindsight of the years that have passed. And if anyone doesn't, believe in shapeshifting, they should have seen this woman's face when she was doing this, because she became someone else. Her face, it was like, whoa, changed to a completely different face.
I would say that Arizona Wilder's testimony is worth listening to. It seems to be consistent with high-level satanic rituals. I would suggest one possibility is that she may have been made to learn the reptilian story, as Spally suggested, so that if her programming did ever begin to break down, she would tell people that it was reptilians instead of satanic rituals. Something that a lot of people miss about her testimony is that the entire purpose for the ritual she did was to summon what she calls demons, or old ones, so that they could give more information about how the New World Order should be set up to the top-level people. It's clear that she believes it's the demons, not reptilians, that are behind the planning for the New World Order.
They materialize from out of another dimension and are present at rituals, and they are so powerful, and their presence is such an evilness about them, and they want out of this other dimension, and they have to be called out by someone who has that power, and the reptilians don't have this power. That's very important, that they don't have this power. So during a ritual, these old ones are called out, and they are what Christianity would have called the demons, and they want out. They're always demanding to be let out. And so you have to be very powerful to keep them in line and to make them go back when it is time for them to go back.
Why do the reptilians want to manifest these quote, demons at the rituals?
It brings power to the rituals. It brings power to them. They are told things by these entities, and they are encouraged to go on with what they're doing, and knowledge is imparted to them through these entities.
If this is the case, why is there no attempt to see what we can learn about them? Why all this focus on reptilians and Mars and Aryans? By her own admission, they aren't calling the shots. The spirits behind them are. I want to mention a few more things about the reptilian issue before moving on. She states that the reptilians change back to reptilians when asleep. Considering how many of them were educated in schools where they also lived amongst hundreds of others in dorms, and many of them are in the armed forces, you would think that someone would have noticed this happening by now. Hey buddy, you don't look so good when you fall asleep. She states that the royal reptilians can't stay in human form at the scent of blood and transform and go crazy, ripping into their victims. And in all those years, nobody has ever noticed this when they cut themselves, been around blood, menstruating women, etc. Considering they are so public, there is no way that they have never been in the vicinity of blood. The other testimony that Ike uses to confirm the reptilian issue is that of Credo Mutwa. This is what Ivan Fraser said about Mutwa. Quote, soon after this, the Arizona Wilder interview, David re-emerged from a trip to Africa, announcing a new video called The Reptilian Agenda, which is an interview with a Zulu shaman called Credo Mutwa, who is confirming the evidence of shape-shifting reptilians. Credo recounts various ancient Zulu myths about the reptilian race which manipulates mankind, which are taken literally by himself and Ike, and seen as a remarkable confirmation of the reptile-human race theory, although Credo's version is that the race actually originated on Earth, left it, and returned. Furthermore, the central reptile Aryan race thesis is fundamentally challenged by Mutwa's assertion that the black leaders of his country and their bloodlines are from the reptilian race also. Mutwa also speaks about personal encounters with gray aliens, which he states are servants of the reptilians. Mutwa elsewhere, rather contradictorily, states that the grays are actually the reptilians with an artificial skin. This contradiction is not challenged by Ike. I also agree with Fraser when he says that both Mutwa and Arizona Wilder may be consciously very genuine in recounting their experiences according to their memories, but I believe we need to be extremely careful before buying into what amounts to circumstantial stories with no proof. Also, I want to address this idea that's circulating on YouTube and other video sites, that people's pupils change and you can tell that they are reptilians this way. This is an effect caused by uploading a video with bad resolution. The same effect is happening with other elements in the picture, but you only notice it on the eyes because the eyes are very detailed things, and when the pixels cut out on them, it's more noticeable than it is with the other elements in the picture. Even Ike doesn't believe this stuff.
All over the internet, people started talking about this now, and these pictures are circulating. This might be probably is just a trick of the light, but it's very symbolic of what we're looking at.
Logos, and I started off with obviously the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill.
Yeah.
And if you notice with the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, on the particular side that it's on, it's the only note that it appears on in America, and there's 4 ones on it, and they ring out 1111 either side of the dollar bill.
Indeed, yeah.
You got the same thing again. And I was looking at that and basically started comparing it to other, American institutions, looking at through, the FBI logo, the CIA logo, every single one of them. You can essentially kind of draw out the pyramid without the capstone, and have an eye in the center. The same geometrics work in a lot of the, the official institutions of America.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get to the source of where this was, and everyone, generally a misinterpretation is that America was the foundation of all of this, in 1776, and, for a while I thought America was the start of all of this New World Order stuff. I didn't think any further than that. My consciousness wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
But eventually came to me, Britain, obviously the British founded America.
Yeah.
On in a Western kind of empire sense, but looked at the British coat of arms, and if you pick up the British coat of arms, again you'll notice that you've got a pyramid, and where the all-seeing eye is, you've got a crown. It's the same thing. You can draw the same geometrics over it, and you've got smack bang the same symbols coming at you. So I was like, right, well, what's going on here then? This is obviously a lot more, ingrained in human civilization, more than I thought, anyhow.
Indeed.
Which point you then start moving to the famous corporate symbols of McDonald's and Schweppes and Starbucks, these amazing corporations that you'll find them in all the symbolic places of the world. Like when I've been to Rome, you've got a McDonald's opposite the Pantheon and the Egyptian obelisk. And then if you go to the Sphinx in Cairo, and you've got a KFC, and you've got a McDonald's right outside the entranceway. And, literally everywhere you go, you can no doubt find one of these kind of food venues or whatever, right next to some of these symbolic structures.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, explain the McDonald's logo. You got 9 letters in the word McDonald's, and I decided to split that up into pyramid numerology. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Split the word up. Do you know what I mean? Into a step kind of structure.
And I think you have this on your blog, isn't that right? So people that are tuning in can take a look at that.
You can take a look at it on my blog, but basically, to spell it out, basically you can form a pyramid-like word out of it, in which the cornerstones and the top part of the pyramid minus the capstone spell the word Mason.
Yeah.
And essentially what the pyramid is showing is that the two arches of Freemasonry, or the golden arches, or whatever you want to call them, emanate from the centre of the pyramid and preside all the way onto the outside of the pyramid. So essentially you've got this event that seems to preside over the pyramid. And then same thing goes with the Schweppes logo. I mean, I had a real good 11/11 moment with this because it happened in a glass of Schweppes tonic water when the ice cubes started ringing at me.
Right.
And I thought that was pretty mental, but it was insinuating something was happening.
Nice.
And I looked on the bottle, and the year 1783, obviously on the all-seeing eye, the date 1776.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, we're a bit too close for comfort here. We're in the period of the Enlightenment, is what they call it.
Yeah.
And look at their logo, and it doesn't even take any deciphering this one. There's a pyramid with an angel on top, with a McDonald's-style M presiding over the pyramid. So essentially you've got more messianic imagery in the logo of a corporate symbol. And all I can think is this company, Schweppes, they teamed up with Cadbury's. They're instrumental in destroying the health of the world because they create sugary drinks and, aspartame-ridden drinks and everything that goes with it. Sure. And they're using this symbology. So you can look at that on my blog yet again because it's all on there.
Very interesting.
Get to Starbucks, and Starbucks, if you look at when you're walking past any old Starbucks, you'll notice that the logo is 3 stars that make a pyramid. And the very top star is seated on top of a crown, which is essentially, symbolic of the all-seeing eye. But underneath the crown is a woman, and that woman is Isis, so the Egyptian deity Isis. And essentially, what I've realised over the past few days is that what these logos are depicting is some form of messianic event.
Yeah.
And when you look into a book, there's a book called The Secret Teachers of All Ages from 1928. By Manly P. Hall. Indeed. And states Isis is sometimes shown standing between 2 great pillars of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
So deity Isis stands between these pillars. So on the McDonald's logo, where you've got the M and you've got the M coinciding on the top of the pyramid, and the same on the Schweppes logo, where you've got the angel stood on top of the pyramid, they're representing Isis. There's no other way of looking at it, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So basically, Isis is symbolic of the all-seeing eye. It's the same thing. Same as when you're looking, for instance, into the Holy Trinity and stuff, and you've got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
There's the evidence of the kind of, the ever-looming one who sees everything but isn't quite there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyhow, this occult symbolism, it works on a dual level, like optical illusions. For instance, you can now look at a picture and do you see the old woman or do you see the young woman?
Yeah.
It's got the duality, same as everything else when it comes down to religion.
Yeah.
Most people are attuned to see one thing, but it actually means another thing as well. But it depends which version you want to go with. There's two ways to look at it. And my opinion on everything with the occult is that it's working on a different plane outside of the 5 sense human reality. It's something that's working in the subconscious.
Yeah.
And going on that principle of mind before matter universe, when you're looking at this occult symbolism, and if one person is, say, looking at the Schweppes logo, and they're drinking Schweppes, and they're buying into this logo, they're buying into the brand, they're buying into all of it, they think they're just buying into a great drink. But they're also buying into this other thing. They're buying into this messianic event. And essentially, if you think about this mind before matter universe, if this occult symbology is working on the subconscious, and it's working on the subconscious of a global population, then it's got the ability to still bring itself forward into matter. Do you know what I mean?
So it's what you're saying is that with the help of all these knowing people, so to speak, this is propelled forward. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for instance, like when someone goes to a McDonald's and they're buying into the McDonald's, how clever they got that anyhow, because it's beautiful. Right. But when they're going in and they're buying those McDonald's, they're also, they're buying into the alternate thing, which is the symbol of, this messianic event on top of the pyramid. It's empowering it. It's giving, it's, you know, it's building it into the subconscious, and that subconscious can precipitate into matter at the right time.
And that's interesting, considering that many of these companies are so, I mean, they're global players. I mean, some of these companies have bigger, you know, a bigger economy and gain more money than certain countries do.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got no idea how they got so successful. I mean, you know, there's no reason for it, to be honest, apart from that there's something else there working with them. You know what I mean?
Do you also think that you know, potentially this could work the other way around, meaning that human beings, since we've been subjected to, at least in the Western world, you know, almost 1700 years of Christianity and so forth, that the reason also why they might want to pick a logo like this or you know, have this message in the logo is that on some level this speaks to our unconscious. So people who are inclined to you know, lean towards the Christian faith, for instance, are actually in some way kind of lured in by these kinds of symbols, and consequently they. I mean, yeah,
definitely. I mean, the thing that I'll draw upon later is that how this works with more than just Christianity. Because if ISIS has many identifications, and she's got an identification as the angel Gabriel and the all-seeing eye and stuff.
Yeah.
But when we talk about this new world order and the one world religion and the one world government, the angel. This number, this 1111, is it seems to work itself into a lot of things. I mean, predominantly the first thing is the universe itself, and obviously on the 11th of August 1999, 11:11 a.m. there was a total solar eclipse that was observed through Europe. And if you move that further on the end date, December 21st, 2012, the end date of the main calendar, the winter solstice, which is when the calendar ends, is at 11:11 a.m.
So I've heard,
obviously, so we've got this effect where the universe is ringing these numbers at us, you know, in accordance to consciousness and stuff. When you look at it in an astrological sense, with the, you know, the precession of the equinoxes and the 26,000 year cycle of the Earth wobbling through the 12 signs of the zodiac, we're said to be moving into the new age of Aquarius, and Aquarius is the 11th astrological sign. And so, getting further into it, you look at the numbers of 2112, 2012, and you add all those numbers up, and you get an 11. And then you look into the sun, for instance, and the sunspot cycle, so 11 years. You can just keep finding these 11s out of things. You could argue that, are you looking for them? But basically, when it's that amount of things within the universe, it's not like I'm looking for them, because they are there.
Yeah.
You can't deny that. And so then you start moving into the numerology of it. And for instance, if you get 1111 and you multiply it by 1111, you get the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is a pyramid. So if you've got 111 and you times it by 111, you get 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. You get a pyramid, whichever way you look at it, anything with a base of 1.
Interesting.
And so then, if you look at the 11 itself, and in binary, an 11 stands for a 3. So obviously you've got a trinity out of it. Do you know what I mean? So if you convert to binary, it would mean it'd be 3. You know 33rd degree Masons? And the 33 that goes around? Obviously if you turn that into the trinity and you divide 33 by 3, you get 11.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, so you start seeing these 11s, as I'm saying. So then you move on to recent events and you get to September the 11th, 2001. Right? And you realise that the building was stood like an 11. The two towers stood like an 11.
Indeed.
And then you've got the 9/11, which is 9 plus 1 plus 1, which is 11. And then you realise that September the 11th was 111 days until the end of the year. And then you start thinking about the first plane that hit the World Trade Center, and it was Flight 11.
There you go, yeah.
Right. And the total number of crew on Flight 11 was 11. And then you look into it further, and the New York State was the 11th state of the US Constitution. And on September 11th, 2001 stands 11 years from 2012. From 1992 to 2012 would be in a period of May of No Time, the time of no time, which was a transition of the ages kind of period in which basically world disasters and tension would be on the up and rise constantly. And this period of no time was 1992 to 2012. And so 9/11 in September the 11th, 2001 was 9 years from the start of no time 11 years till the end of no time. So synchronistically it was placed bang on where it should have been. So then you start thinking about an event, was it designed by the universe for it to happen as it did? You look into it further, and World Trade Center commenced building in 1966 and finished building it in 1977, so it took 11 years to create as well. And then you can get to September the 11th in history, and on September the 11th 1990 at 9:09 p.m, that's 11 years prior to 9/11, George Bush Sr. made his very first speech entitled "Towards a New World Order," at the UN. So this was 11 years prior. And then if you take that back 60 years, so you go back to September the 11th, 1941, you'll realise that was when the soil was broken for the Pentagon.
Pentagon, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so you've got this date, September the 11th, again running through this kind of, it's the nasty war machine of America, if you want to call it that.
Exactly.
There's something that happened much further back in time than that, and there's a book written in 1981, and it was called Birth of Christ Recalculated, and it was written by a guy called Ernest L. Martin. And he claims to have calculated the exact date of Jesus Christ's birthday based on celestial charts for that era. He worked out that essentially Jesus Christ was born on September the 11th, 3 BC. When you think about America and NASA and stuff, the very first shuttle that got to the moon was Apollo 11.
Yeah, there you go.
And then, for instance, in Great Britain, 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we celebrate Remembrance Day. We honour our war dead, but it's on an 11/11. The Queen and a load of other people taking poppies to a cenotaph, which is an obelisk essentially. So, little strange events going on all over the place. I mean, talking about the Queen moving into royalty, basically if you look into the history of the word crown and the royal crown, the word crown was derived from Anglo-French word called caroon, which is derived from Latin for corona. But the year that the word crown, was first established was in the year 1111.
Really? That's interesting.
Right. So,
wow.
I mean, you can't just say that these are coincidences. All of these things that are kind of connected up, and I get to a point where at first I thought there were coincidences, but then you think, what is this thing called chance?
It's interesting, and to some extent, I think that this is information that wants to get out. I think it's kind of a self-containing awareness within itself, meaning that it is trying to reach out and teach us how things are interconnected. And I think that numerology and so-called coincidence or meaningful coincidence, synchronicity, is a perfect way to demonstrate to us that everything is interconnected. And I think that there are so many levels to all of this. So what we're beginning to discover are some of the most, in a way, actually obvious and very clear signs of this. But I would imagine that this is something that actually runs throughout exactly everything.
I believe in a mind before matter universe. Everything stems from consciousness. Consciousness precipitates matter, not the other way around, as scientists would have you believe it. I don't mean to be crude about this, but when, for instance, a man is sleeping and he has an orgasm in the middle of the night, right, the process that has created that is not any physical action, it's all stemmed from thought. And so if you think about that, then obviously that thought has then created the ability to create life.
That's right.
You understand where I'm coming from?
Oh yeah, definitely, exactly. It's a very good point.
That for me is the proof that everything is a mind before matter universe. You can create life with thought. So that means that everything that you're looking at essentially is consciousness.
Coming in gaps, never love a gap. Coming in